David Dunn. He's a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham, and he joins me now live from London. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. So, my first question, should he resign?
I think it's unlikely that he will resign because there is no one obvious to replace him. And indeed, no one wants to replace him now, 4 months before the elections in May, when they would inherit the likely defeat of the party in those polls across the country and in Scotland. So for the time being, what's happened is that there's no appetite among the senior colleagues to oust him, and they're happy to hang on to him and give him one last chance, or perhaps a delayed execution.
How long before he loses support from his allies?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think it's unlikely, unless things change radically, that he will be here in a year's time, let alone in 3 years' time when the party has to go to the country in an election. It's a real question of whether he can. It's a race really between his ability to change direction and demonstrate that he actually has got a grip on the vision of where the country needs to go, or whether his opponents can gather enough momentum behind a single candidate to replace him in a way that doesn't look chaotic and messy. So that's where we are. There was an attempted coup yesterday and over the weekend. That coup failed. The Labour Party looked over the abyss and they didn't like the alternative to having him there as a weakened and apparently weak leader. And as a consequence of that, they're happy to put up with him just now. But the time is ticking on his future unless he can actually demonstrate a different sort of leadership, and maybe removing all his team of advisors is a way to achieve that. Unless he can do that, then his days are numbered. But it may well be after the May election and not before.
Professor, what does this mean for the wider political spectrum of the United Kingdom?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why he's still in post is that despite the fact that actually the opinion polls for him are dire and that he seemed to have made a lot of bad judgment calls in the time that he's been in office, a very short time in office, there is still a reluctance to move against him because there has been such instability since the Brexit vote in 2016, whereby we've had 6 prime ministers in 10 years. And therefore, there is a reluctance to give further turbulence to the system, what that does to the bond markets, what that does to the economy, what that does in terms of actually Britain's international reputation. So a lot of those things are reasons why they're still hanging on to him, despite the frustrations with his leadership so far. But it's clearly not over yet, and that there is a period of turbulence and uncertainty going forward in the next 6 months, the next 4 months, whatever it might be. And it's not a given that Starmer will be Prime Minister in 6 or 12 months' time.
Fascinating insights, Professor David Dunn. Thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.